Our topic today is responsible social media and acceptable use for kids. Tim, can you tell us more about how to protect social identities?
It starts with the beginning of your child's use in social media. A lot of kids, they want to identify and be identified by their friends. They want to be found easy. They want their site to be public. They want as many followers as possible because it's good to be popular. The more followers you have, the better. So they will tend to use their full names, middle initials when they create their accounts. And that's really where it starts. So once they create that identity in the beginning with their names, it's very difficult to go back and change those titles. And then they'll start using the same name and same password for every account they create because it's easy for them to remember. And once they do that, it becomes extremely easy to find them and victimize them.
So why is it important for parents and kids to have a biological background?
First of all, I think that as parents and educators, if we want to empower our children to make healthy and safe choices when they're online, we need to connect with them on the subject. And so I actually bring kind of a positive side to this subject because I think there are many pitfalls with social media use. Kids are also using social media in really positive ways, and so I think that's one piece of this. Social media can affect health and behaviors in many different ways, and I think that if parents and educators, if we try to understand kind of what's behind this in our kids, what is driving them, that need for connectedness is really an evolutionary need that comes from way back when, where we had to leave the comfort of the cave and go out with the lions and the bears, and we had to survive, and there's safety in numbers, and so you have to find the peer group, and not just find them, but you have to be accepted by them, so you have to fit in with them, and maybe that means looking like them and behaving like them, and sort of, kind of putting that in that context, and also talking to parents and kids about the teenage brain and the way that we develop in life as adolescents, and why there isn't the best impulse control necessarily. Why are kids this age so emotional? There are very important biological reasons against this, and so I think as adults, if we understand that, it may not make the behaviors less terrifying or frustrating, but we can have a little bit more patience around it and sort of connect with kids in a different way, and for them to understand this about themselves. And happy to talk about later about different ways that the online behavior affects health and conversations to have about that.
And then Mary, you use reflection and mindfulness in your practices. You want to go into that?
Yes, so I think that mindfulness has really made its way into many areas, particularly in K-12. There are a lot of studies now where I saw an article where one of the, I think a high school in an urban area had replaced detention with yoga classes. I see the nods here. And so one of the things that we actually use in our graduate program is mindfulness and reflection, and we will actually kind of give exercises about go away from your computer and then write something short and post that back. And that there are actually, though, other groups where people who practice this reflection and mindfulness in their everyday life, that is another avenue to explore with teenagers and even younger children to kind of expand their thinking. So it's something that they actually are doing that is supported online through social media, but is something that they practice doing offline away from all of their devices. So speaking about the brain science, it is wiring the brain in a completely different way. So it's kind of a complementary way of using the tools that are there.
How are our offline identities coherent with our online identities, and how are they two different personas?
You probably wonder when you see teenagers who, as parents or as educators, who behave perfectly well in the classroom at home, what would cause them to go online and say something kind of weird, kind of mean? So what I've seen is that I think there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes between the online world and the real world. And social etiquette has been established for so many years in the real world, but we all kind of got this online world thrust upon us in the past few decades, and we're all coming up to speed at the same time. So whether you're an educator or a toddler, you kind of came into it at the same time. But as the educator, the onus is on you to come up to speed faster than the toddler and faster than the teenager and have some authority. So that's part of it. And that means that since everyone's a little bit new to it, it doesn't seem as real, it seems abstract. And because it seems abstract, we don't maybe bring the same rules that we have during the day. So I think this is something that I don't have expertise in. This is you guys really should, might know this better. But how to make them see that the online world is real, that those are real people, and the internet is not something that lives in the cloud and in the sky. So once that's established, I think then all the interactions will feel just like they do, and then you'll have a more consistent persona, which is the goal. Like a digital footprint that starts early and is a strong foundation for like a future online is, I think, the best way forward, as opposed to being overly cautious. Like the online world is real and it's getting bigger and bigger, so as long as you're involved and you're authentic, I think you give yourself the best shot.
Tim actually had some ideas about how creating the digital footprint.
If I'm going to hire somebody to work in a police department, we're going to ask you for your passwords and accounts to social media. And I know I've heard stories in the private market where they'll sit you down and say, flip the keyboard around the computer and say, log into your account right now. And if you say no or I don't want to, then they'll say, okay, thank you, and they'll finish the interview, and you will not be a candidate. But there are laws, and it's getting more identified that they can't do that, and there's rules that are coming about that, but there's always ways around that. So for a teenager to build themselves a good online presence is just as important as, say, our LinkedIn accounts. You really want your kids to portray a well-rounded, they can go out and have fun and be goofy with their kids, but they also need to highlight their talents. They need to put it, if they play guitar or they go volunteer at the beach cleanup, they need to be putting that stuff on their pages and making that available. It may not be available because you want your kids to have private accounts, if at all possible, but when they are asked to see their accounts, people are going to look at that, and that goes as far as what your friends are posting about you too. So if you have your online identity, but your party buddies have a complete different identity of you based on their tags and their hashtags and location tags with you in it, then that's going to reflect on you also.
Parents and starting to teach from a very early age that the rules in real life are the same rules that should apply online. So if you are educating young children and and they're dealing with real life conflicts, that concept of okay, you said this, is it true, is it kind, is it necessary, sort of asking those same questions about whatever you're posting. It's the same world. So I think parents get very nervous because they feel like they're out of control, that they don't understand this world that their kids are in, and then they kind of take their hands off the wheel, forgetting that they have this life experience to draw on.
Would you say that if you engage in a lot of positive activity online, then that'll sort of build a foundation for this is thinking that it's a real place? So if you start off with doing things that give you a lot of real feedback and validation online as a child, but that would translate into
Well, I think that the way that parents are intentional and thoughtful in the way that they rule out this whole plan. So if you have my 10-year-old is very interested in her friends and is very interested in having a phone and is very interested in social media. She's not going to have a phone for a couple more years at the minimum. I'm very active on social media, and so the way I'm introducing it to her is sharing certain posts with her, the positive ones. So showing her the ways that people use social media in positive ways, demonstrating their photography skills or their community service. And so kind of letting her know that. And then when she does eventually start, I'm talking about her because my son, who's older, has no interest in this world, so he's his own person, but she's the one that is going to really just glom onto this, and so I want to be very sure that she does it in a positive light. And it is very much a real world, and I share experiences with both of my kids. I had someone that I was following on Instagram that I knew, very peripherally, who was a real estate agent, and I realized recently all her posts were selfies of herself and like what she was wearing to take out the clients, and I thought, like, I don't have time for, like, what does that have to do with anything? And so I don't follow her anymore, and it was one little example, not to shame her for her behavior, but just to say, like, people are paying attention to what you're putting out there. So you can put out substantive, meaningful, positive stuff, or you can put out, this fluff that is really not necessarily of interest to everyone.
You just got to engage in that conversation with the kids, and you need to bring them back to your world and listen to their world and try to come to a happy medium and just get them to feel comfortable talking to you about things. And I think that's extremely important.
I also would add that social media and the online world actually is a fantastic way to connect with our kids on all sorts of topics. And so I really encourage parents to engage with their children, because if you're having a hard time talking about sex or bodies or about drug or alcohol use, gosh, just get online and you're going to see stuff, and it just opens up the door to communication about sensitive subjects.
With kids, like, you have to, they're not going to be able to learn from bad experiences sometimes until it's too late. So you have to share examples of things that have happened in the world so that they can resonate with them, because sometimes they don't believe you when you say, turn this setting off or don't do this. So one of those examples was a girl was having a Sweet 16, and she didn't realize that her invitation was open to the public, and 3,000 people showed up to her party, and it was awful. She posted it on social media, and it was meant to be for a closed group of people, and it wasn't. And this again brings back the idea that when you sit in front of a computer, it's the same computer. It might be in your room or it might be in your living room, but depending on what the setting is, it could be the equivalent of having a private chat in your house, or it could be the equivalent of having a very public conversation in front of the entire world. And this is something that we can't tell sometimes when we're teenagers sitting in our bedrooms, but it's really important to make that distinction feel real. And for this girl, it happened a little bit too late. So, you all know the kids in your life well enough to know maybe what would connect with them, but there are horror stories like this. I'm sure you're aware, all of you. So if you can spread those around and get them to see that, again, it's real and it happens. Sometimes you might be the one to show them a bad example, but do it in a way that's funny. So if someone leaves a screen unlocked or their phone unlocked, post a funny picture of yourself on your kid's Facebook. See how they react to that. It's a little jab, it's a little mistake, and they learn so well from mistakes, but it's little enough to not damage them, enough to make them think twice next time.
How would you encourage or discourage monitoring by parents?
It's a fine line. It really is. I'm kind of leaning towards the monitor side probably because of my job more than anything, because I see a lot more of the dangers and the results and the horror stories and the simple and I'm not saying monitor your kids because you don't trust them, but you can't trust the people that they're interacting with. You wouldn't send your 12-year-old to the mall by themselves because you're worried about them getting kidnapped, getting worse things happening to them. It's not that you're worried about them stealing or anything like that. It's just that it's not safe, and the internet is the same thing. I would never let a kid go into the internet by themselves without any type of monitoring. Call it spying, call it you can call it all different things, but there's different degrees of monitoring. And if you take the monitoring on the angle of I want to protect my kid, not spy on my kid, and you got to overlook the little things, like if your kid says a bad word or goes somewhere that's borderline, you don't want to jump on them every time they do it. You just want to let it go and take a deep breath and then make sure it doesn't happen again. But you want to save that for the big one so you don't lose that trust. And it's all about interacting. You can see something they did and then a week later, unrelated, bring it up to where they don't think that you're bringing this up because of social media. So there's all kinds of ways to do it. But I'm on the monitor side personally.
So you could say it's online etiquette for teens and online etiquette for parents.
That's so true, because I have seen parent behavior that's worse than the teenage behavior, where the parents now have this window into this world. I mean, adolescents are going to use foul language. They're going to say things to get a reaction. This is part of that age, and we all did it back in the day, but when we were in the park or the mall or whatever, and parents weren't there to overhear everything. And so now they have this window in, and they see something, and then the parents go bananas, and they start shaming the child, and that is a big problem. So I agree with you in terms of, I think certainly very young children, the monitoring should be you're sitting next to them and looking at the screen, because that is just a must when they're very young. As they get older, I think that these different monitoring devices are fine. As they become adolescents, though, I think we have to let out the leash, and we have to realize that the kinds of decisions that they're making in the real world are probably going to translate into their online life. So if you have a kid who's very responsible and is managing their time well and their schoolwork well and their friends well and is making really good decisions, is going to the party, isn't drinking at the party, this is a kid who probably you can let the leash out a little bit more in terms of their online life. If you are going to monitor, I think it's critical that you let the child know that you're monitoring. I am totally against spying personally, because I think that it erodes the trust between parent and child, and it drives the behavior underground. They're going to find out eventually, and then they're going to find other ways to get onto these sites and do stuff without you knowing it. That's my personal take on that. Not everybody agrees clearly, but I do think that eventually they're going to have to manage in this world as adults, and so we need to just realize that they're going to make some mistakes, and sometimes it's okay to let kids stumble. Certainly there are big risks involved at times, but that's where the communication comes in, and mentoring. You can't monitor but not mentor, because that's a totally false sense of security to think that the filters and the devices are going to parent for you. You have to get your hand on the wheel and take control as a parent.
And I should have mentioned that there is a Senate bill that just recently went through that makes it illegal for us as parents to monitor our children without their knowledge. So you can't monitor anybody without their knowledge. So that kind of solves that problem. That's California. So for those of you that are out of state, every state is different. Some states have it. Federal will never get involved in that. But the state laws, you got to check your state laws. I'm talking about software, downloaded software programs.
When my son got his first smartphone, he was graduating from 6th grade and moving on to a middle school. And I said to him, listen, this is new technology for you, and I'm going to be checking it. I'm not going to watch every word you say constantly, but just know that I'm going to check in periodically, and if I see a text come through, I'm going to read it. And he knows that we're doing this from the point of safety and health. You need to sleep at night, the devices are off because you have to get sleep. Big proponent of sleep. He did a study that found that 46% of 10 to 23-year-olds said that they would change their online activity if they knew that their parents were paying attention. And I think that if your kid knows you're watching, they are going to behave a little bit differently, and it also can give them an out. It allows them to say, it allows them to say that I'm not going to engage in this online activity because mom's watching. She's breathing down my neck all the time, and that's okay for that. Like I tell my kids, throw me under the bus. It's just like if you're going to the party and the drugs come out and you need to get out, you can say whatever excuse you have about me, that's okay. I don't care. I don't have a stake in this game.
I think that is a really good point about the mentoring, and that it actually then even extends beyond the teen, when they hit undergrad and when they're in graduate school. I was thinking of a particular incident where a young man who came into our program who's a very accomplished professional, but he just had a way of posting where he posted kind of like he talked, which was somewhat profane. And I called him and I said, we really kind of need to have this conversation because because my dean is in your particular site, and so unless you want to meet the dean and have him understand you as just speaking this way, then maybe you want to clean your act up now rather than after you see him and after I have to get a phone call about why is your student, why should things be censored that your student is posting, in the group, because the group is owned by the university, so that was a little different. I think it's really challenging as a parent to monitor, just because the channels change so quickly. Just like with Instagram, just like with Snapchat, which I've never had, but my kids have, and just like where the next thing is going to come, right? So whatever the middle schoolers are using now, and that will be the next thing that's really capitalized in the future. So I think there's definitely a challenge for parents to kind of keep up, because it's not just Facebook and Instagram and email and text and everything else. Stuff changes, and it can change in 2 weeks. So for me personally, that is a really, really big challenge in terms of monitoring. I hope that I'm very active on social media also, so I hope that I also am modeling what I want for my kids to do, and how to engage with others whom they know in real life and whom they know only virtually.
Even for real etiquette or online etiquette for teens, I mean, there's some degree of exploration and freedom that's required, right? You can monitor in areas where there's a clear risk sometimes, like, I see what badness there is on the internet, and sometimes it makes sense. But apart from that, I think just mentoring and being a good role model, so starting early and creating contained spaces online, maybe a family-only Facebook group or whatever it may be, if it's a text thread, something that shows that you can, digitally engage with people and have really positive interactions with them. I think that's the best way to foster good etiquette. That's the way we learn in real life. But yeah, monitoring, there are real risks, and no matter how, like all of you said, no matter how responsible a teen is, they cannot protect themselves from some of these other, bad intentions.
Yes.
So can we talk about sexting?
Yes, that's middle school. That's why I brought it up.
So which is definitely happening in middle school. A kid gets sent a text of a sex, like a nude photo. What should they do?
The safe answer is delete it, and definitely don't pass it along. That's where you take an innocent child, maybe a teenager, and the second they pass that picture along, they could have committed a felony in the state of California, or any state for that matter. It's a very serious crime. So that is something every parent and teacher should be discussing, how critical that is, that it's not just morally and ethically an issue, it's also a criminal issue, and they need to understand that. We get every variation. We get kids that pass it along, and other kids, then it becomes a discussion talked about in the school, and then it becomes a big deal where the school gets involved and start pulling kids in. It becomes a mess. We have kids that will go and immediately turn it over to the principal, or it doesn't happen very often, or their teacher or counselor maybe. But for the most part, they don't do anything with it. They keep it. Depends on the medium. Sometimes it goes away quick. Sometimes they capture it. Most of the time,
sometimes they trade it.
They trade it, and that's how we find out about it most of the time is when the picture's trading, like they send it out to somebody else.
Like baseball cards.
One picture for the other picture.
Because I'm not a parent yet, but I do remember what it was like to be a teen not too long ago. That you can monitor in areas where there's a clear risk sometimes. Like, I see what badness there is on the internet, and sometimes it makes sense. But apart from that, I think just mentoring and being a good role model, so starting early and creating contained spaces online, maybe a family-only Facebook group or whatever it may be, if it's a text thread, something that shows that you can, digitally engage with people and have really positive interactions with them. I think that's the best way to foster good etiquette. That's the way we learn in real life. But yeah, monitoring, there are real risks, and no matter how, like all of you said, no matter how responsible a teen is, they cannot protect themselves from some of these other, bad intentions. So it's a judgment call that's very personal.
Thank you. Any questions? There have to be some questions.
Because you're here.
Yes.
So can we talk about sexting?
Yes. That's middle school. That's why I brought it up.
So which is definitely happening in middle school, and between the sexting and the pornography exposure, which is happening at younger and younger ages, that's where I get a lot of calls from parents about that. So I would like to know from you, with your law enforcement background, if a kid gets sent a text of a sex, like a nude photo, what should they do?
Well, the safe answer is delete it and definitely don't pass it along. That's where you take an innocent child, maybe a teenager, and the second they pass that picture along, they could have committed a felony in the state of California, or any state for that matter. It's a very serious crime. So that is something every parent and teacher should be discussing, how critical that is, that it's not just morally and ethically an issue, it's also a criminal issue, and they need to understand that. We get every variation. We get kids that pass it along, and other kids, then it becomes a discussion talked about in the school, and then it becomes a big deal where the school gets involved and start pulling kids in. It becomes a mess. We have kids that will go and immediately turn it over to the principal, or it doesn't happen very often, or their teacher or counselor maybe. But for the most part, they don't do anything with it. They keep it. Depends on the medium. Sometimes it goes away quick. Sometimes they capture it. Most of the time,
Sometimes they trade it.
They trade it, and that's how we find out about it most of the time is when the picture's traded. Trading, like they send it out to somebody else.
Like baseball cards.
One picture for the other picture.
Yeah.
Yes. Girls' locker room stuff.
So I asked the question because I'm wondering, I've read, there's a lot that seems to come out of Australia on this subject. I don't know what's going on over there, but we have plenty of it here as well. And I think I've read about instances, and this whole thing is an issue because child pornography laws, started with the intent of protecting children, but now they're being used against kids. Sometimes, not consistently. If it was consistent, I think the behavior would change, but it seems a little willy-nilly who's going to decide to prosecute and who's going to take the case seriously and who's going to just counsel the kids. But I've heard about these cases where parents, find out, and it may even have been a consensual thing where it's, two 17-year-olds who are dating and they're exchanging photos, but then there's a breakup and now you have this evidence and they're minors, and so now you are in possession of child pornography. And I've heard of cases where the parents have sort of kept a copy as evidence as it was going through the authorities and through legal process, and then the parent getting labeled as a sex offender because they're in possession of this stuff. So if a family wanted to report something to the authorities, do they need? If it's been deleted, you guys can still get to it. I mean, what do you need evidence? Do you not need evidence?
It depends on what they use to transfer it. But everything can be found digitally on forensics. So we can go back and get anything off of a phone. So if it's deleted, still report it. If you have it for the purposes of reporting, that's good, but delete it as soon as you report it. It just all depends, but we can go back and find that stuff. And you got to understand that I've heard stories of teenagers creating fake accounts of young girls and purposely targeting another student, creating a conversation with that student, sending them fake nude pictures, and as soon as they start getting nude pictures of that young boy, they blast it at the school just to humiliate and target that kid. They know more than we do. Don't ever think that you're ever going to know more than the kids know about social media, the internet, and how to do things because they are the experts. And that is one of the reasons I'm an advocate of trying to protect kids through monitoring.
And also, I think it's important, I'm not suggesting that all of those cases should be reported either. I mean, a lot of this is impulse control. Kids think stuff is funny. There are certain instances where behavior is repeated and it becomes more serious.
Yeah, I also, since you're here, I also have a question. If anybody else have a question first? No? Okay. The choking game. Are you familiar with that? No. Yeah. Yeah, where they post something on YouTube or post something on Facebook and they're asphyxiating themselves and then they come out of it, but some kids don't come out of it. And I think, 11, 12-year-olds are doing this game. So, can you address that? Not etiquette.
It's not just the choking game, it's everything. It's nitrous oxide, it's jumping off roofs, it's stunts on the bikes, it's all a matter of showcasing the popularity. And it's not just kids, it's adults too. Social media is an outlet for, like you were saying, their online identity is so much different than their personal identity, and things like Jackass and those nitrous circus and all those things that make all this stuff popular for the kids. That's why they're doing it. They're not doing it because, I mean, certainly there's an element to it that they want that feeling, that euphoria that comes with it. They think it's fun, but yes, you have deaths involved in these stunts, and it's all about popularity and getting that viral video.
Can you address this?
How to stop?
Help? Yeah, how to stop it? How to help it?
Well, first, I mean, it's good to understand how things go viral. This is not intuitive. Again, remember how when you're sitting in your bedroom doing something online, it's not intuitive that if you post it to 2 friends and that multiplies, it could suddenly be all over the internet, and then it's too late. So in that case, you have so many viral videos, but you don't know about the aftermath. You don't know the ugly stories. So that's on you guys to find and to bring to light. I think you can only combat one piece of information with another piece of information, and then ultimately the kids will have, when they have to do something, they'll be able to judge. But you have to provide both sides of the story, and that hopefully is, when you can't monitor and prevent, then that's the next best thing you can do.
This is also where parenting and knowing your child is really important, because not all kids are going to see those videos and think it's a good idea to do that, right? So if you have a child who is really sensation-seeking type child who takes part in risk behaviors, those are the ones that you're going to have to watch and really have more conversations than you see the stuff come up in the news or whatever the case may be. But I feel like we went to a deep, dark place. Social media is also, it's not all bad.
Are there any techniques or anything that you can suggest, Doctor, for the parents in the group to increase their teens' etiquette?
Well, I think, again, it just comes down to conversations. I think one thing that's important to realize is that when it comes to health risk behaviors like drinking, alcohol, drugs, risky sexual behaviors, kids tend to make decisions about those behaviors based on their perceptions of their peers' behaviors, but their perceptions are not always accurate, and social media really plays a role in making it seem like everybody's doing something when everyone's really not doing something. And so if we can, talk to them about statistics, how many kids are actually drinking at this age? How many kids are actually hooking up? The statistics are not nearly as scary as we all think they are, because we're looking at all these photos and feeling like that's what's happening in the world. And so I think it just all comes down to conversations. You just have to keep talking to your kids.
If you have a teenage girl that's misguided, that loves the internet and wants to really, that is constantly on there, go out and spend $100 and buy them a ukulele and let them sit in front of YouTube. And it is the most fascinating thing to watch. We've used it several times for parents with troubled kids. It's a fascinating to watch what they do, and then they start posting pictures, videos of themselves playing the ukulele online, and they get that positive feedback. But that's just one of you can think of tons of examples to keep your kid occupied. But we got the idea. My son has taught himself to play guitar, banjo, electric guitar, and ukulele, all from YouTube. And when you talk about the internet being a great place, it's out there. There's people out there that there's hundreds of instructional videos, and music is a great outlet to take music and the internet and combine them. I think it's effective, especially for some reason young girls and ukuleles seem to work well.
My daughter plays. I do too.
My 17-year-old bought one on eBay and taught herself.
Too bad. Okay, looking forward, what advice would you give to be ahead of the game in 3 years? We're going to wrap up. If anybody doesn't have any burning questions.
If you were in the other panel, I don't have much more advice other than, well, I wish I could say don't ever update any app or systems, because then nothing changes. But when you update your systems and all of our apps, it's going to change everything. So you just really need to pay attention to the changes that come with all of these apps. Instagram has migrated from a simple photo app to live. It's got a Snapchat element now. It's got direct messaging. It's now become the app, the one stop for everything when it comes to kids. So you have to keep up, constantly know everything that your kids are doing, what apps they have on their phone, and the dangers that, like what Josh had online was a great resource to look at his chart and say, okay, they just downloaded WhatsApp. Oh, WhatsApp, what is it? And you'll find that it's a texting program where you don't need, it's internet based. So your kids can carry on group texts and text with each other without ever being traced on a phone bill.
All over the world.
All over the world, exactly. Google?
Yeah, that's a question for Google.
So this is, again, a personal choice. Sometimes, oftentimes applications need information to, give you a better user experience. So you might fall on one line where you say no to everything. Someone else, say a child, might fall on the other line where they say very trusting and they say yes to everything. So with a lot of conversations, as long as you can understand what adds value and what does not add value, you'll be fine. Because that's the first step. So many people don't even understand the basic nuts and bolts of what's going on in an application. Why are they asking for these 3 pieces of information? What are they doing with it? Well, they're giving you something back. So sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not.
Teens like to have the location on sometime, and adults, because they're somewhere cool. And so when they post it, they want to post the location so everyone can see they were at that, because it's not just the general location. It's like, I'm at such and such restaurant in such and such city, right? And so I think that's another conversation to have. Why is it important for you to have everybody know where you were? What's the value of that? Or if that's really important to you, do you need to post it while you're still there? Can you wait a couple hours and post it once you're back home, and then everyone will still know where you were, but you're not there because you're broadcasting to the world your location at that given moment. Also on phones, when you take photos, many phones, the default is that it's geo-tagged. So as a parent, especially if you have younger kids, I usually recommend turning that off, because as you're posting these pictures online, theoretically people can get in there and see where the location is, and if you're posting pictures in the same location, that could be a way for someone to locate you.
One other quick thing on the future: if you have children are they're the highest growing victims of identity theft, and the reason is all of us probably reasonably check our credit on a regular basis. I know I do it every month. Most people do, or they get alerts from their banks. But none of us ever check our kids' credit. And because of social media and how much information our kids are putting out there, our kids are falling victim. By the time they become 18 and want to apply for a student loan or a credit card, their credit is so jacked up because somebody stole their identity when they're 5 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old, and it's a mess.
You can lock credit, your own and your kids. Just goes by their social security number. You can lock it down so no one can open up a line of credit. It's locked.
Okay, Mary, looking forward, what advice would you give to stay ahead of the game in 3 years?
So I was told once to always look at what the middle schoolers are using, because that will be the next big thing. And I think it really it is challenging because of all of the changes with the apps, with the globalization. So I have WhatsApp because I worked a session in China, and that was the only way that we could text each other without an international SIM in our phones. And it's kind of like, it's a whole new world, but you have to just keep going with your eyes and ears open, because the kids will be using the technology even if they don't have a smartphone. My 10-year-old also wants a smartphone, and we said, no, you have no reason to have a smartphone. But her friends in daycare after school have smartphones, and they sit there and, they play games, and they don't really Google a lot of stuff, but they have these activities. So there are ways that even if they don't have a device themselves, they're around people who have devices, and so it's teaching them also to pay attention to what is going on, just like the way we teach them when they're little about stranger danger, that you coach them about these are the kinds of things just to be aware of as you're venturing into this space.
Namisha?
So going forward, I think the best thing you can do is build a habit of being like just a little bit more aware. First step is to be a little bit more aware, and then be more and more knowledgeable, but a little bit more aware of what a piece of information that you post right now can do in a few years. So think of that long-term thing. So we heard about, building a good online presence so that can pay dividends sometime in the future. Similarly, if you put out the wrong information, you can have identity theft. So awareness is one way to do that. The other is to just be really aware of those settings, because maybe depending on the kind of behavior you want to engage in, you can create a safe space for yourself where you cannot allow for a freer flow of information because you know what's locked down. I mean, just as in the real world, you can have a very real brick fence, you can have a very real firewall, you can have a very real setting that just blocks data and is a so knowledge is the first thing, and then deciding what kind of experience you want, so you can start to build that world for yourself online, and hopefully everyone's world will be a little bit different and customized to their own needs, as opposed to a cookie cutter, share everything or don't share anything type of situation.
Thank you, everybody. Are we all complete? Are we good?
Yeah.
Everybody good? Any questions? No? All right, thank you.